thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon for an incredible event, a Henning Award that we're presenting to a special friend of mine and the college. My name is Tim Farley, and I'm the Director of Community and Government Relations for St. Mary's College, and I've had the opportunity to work here, the dream job, if you will, for the last 8 years. And the thing that makes the dream job so wonderful is I've had an opportunity to work with some really incredible people in leadership. Brother Ron Gallagher earlier, and then 3 years ago we had the opportunity to welcome our first lay president, our first president that's not a Christian brother, and he's done an outstanding job. So I'd like to welcome Jim Donahue. Come on up here and say a few words as we get started.
Thank you, Tim, very much. It's always interesting when you say the first non-Christian brother. I mean, non-Christian brother or non-Christian brother. Anyway, it requires a little bit of clarification. I just want to welcome all of you here. The Henning Institute is the embodiment and the manifestation of what is core to St. Mary's College and the mission that we hold, the values we hold, our Catholic identity, our Lasallian identity, our liberal arts tradition, our engagement with Catholic social thought. These are the pillars upon which St. Mary's College of California is built. And we're just so delighted to welcome our esteemed guest, our honoree, George Miller, our representative, Mark DeSaulnier, and it's just wonderful. I just wanted to read a little bit from the not the mission statement, but the description of what the Henning Institute is. It's inspired by the life and work of John F. Henning, a St. Mary's College graduate, former U.S. Undersecretary of Labor, who also served for 26 years as the Executive Secretary-Treasurer of the California Labor Federation, AFL-CIO. The Henning Institute is a center for the study of Catholic social thought with special emphasis on the question of human work and its centrality to the common good. Students are invited to take part in the Institute's program of academic conferences, lectures, publications, and seminars. And for the Henning family that are here, for all who have been associated with the Henning Institute for so long, I just want to welcome you here. It's truly a very special occasion for us, and we're in for a very, very wonderful, wonderful afternoon. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Donahue. As I mentioned, St. Mary's has been blessed with some incredible leadership over the years. A couple of years ago, we celebrated our sesquicentennial, our 150th year as a college. We started in San Francisco, moved to Oakland, and we've been hosted here since 1928. And 1928 is also a special year because that's the year that our good friend Brother Mel Anderson was born. And Brother Mel was a legendary president in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. And when he arrived, he looked around and there was a bunch of young men here. He said, "This isn't right." He said, "Why don't we allow women to come to St. Mary's?" And just like that, women came to St. Mary's. We're going to have Brother Mel, I'm going to ask to come up and give an invocation. After the invocation, you're invited to enjoy your meal, and then I'll come back a little bit later for the rest of the program. But ladies and gentlemen, legendary Brother Mel Anderson.
Thank you very much. In the words of Pope Francis, "Praise be to thee, O Lord," and in the words of St. Francis, "Through our sister, Mother Earth, let the favor of the Lord, our God, be upon us, and prosper for us the work of our hands. O prosper the work of our hands." Jesus worked with his hands in daily contact with the materials created by God, to which he gave forth form by his craftsmanship. Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary? You graciously sanctified human labor, Lord, and endowed it with a special significance for our development in working, thinking, creating, and ability to care. We ask for your blessing, Lord, on those dedicated to fostering the common good by acknowledging the profound dignity of the working man and woman through the labor movement. And we ask a special blessing on Congressman Emeritus George Miller for his support and protection of those who work by the sweat of their brow. We also ask that the labor movement vigorously include in its loving care our common natural home, and that it continue to work to improve the quality of life for the poorest among us. We ask, therefore, Lord, that you prosper the millions of American workers who live and love by the work of their hands. Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts, which are about to receive from thy body, through Christ our Lord. Amen.
We have a special treat this afternoon. We have the St. Mary's Glee Club will be performing for us. And just by way of background, last year they were performing all over the world, and they were performing in Eastern Europe. And while they were there, there was a promoter from Carnegie Hall who found them, and he approached Dr. Julie Ford and said, "What can I do to bring the St. Mary's Glee Club to Carnegie Hall?" So earlier this year, these fine students performed at Carnegie Hall. Dr. Ford, come on up.
Thank you. Carnegie Hall was pretty great, I must admit. But I want you to know that it's our ability to share our music with you and people in our community that really uplifts us so much. So thank you for inviting us. Ladies, and go ahead and step forward one step so we have a little more room. We are, because of our honorees' tremendous dedication to others, we have some songs here that are similar in that theme and really speak to our great dignity as people, the indivisibility of humanity, and reaching for higher love, reaching for higher causes, how that can bring so much meaning to life. So we congratulate our honoree, and we do this in your honor. Thank you so much for having us.
We've learned to be flexible. Think about it. There must be a higher love down in the heart or hidden to the stars above. Without it, life is wasting time. Look inside your heart, I'll look inside of mine. Things look so bad everywhere in this whole world. What is fair? We walk blind and we try to see. Falling behind in what could be. Bring me a higher love. Bring me a higher love. Oh, bring me a higher love. Where's that higher love that I'm thinking of? The world's turning and we're hanging on. We're hanging on. Facing the dark and the fear, standing all alone. There's a yearning about it, and it's real about it. Oh, there must be someone out there who has feeling for me. Things look so bad everywhere, in this whole world. What is fair? We walk blind and we try to see. Falling behind in what could be. Oh, bring me a higher love. Oh, bring me a higher love. A higher love. It's that higher love that I'm thinking of.
And I like to tell the women, in particular, to be encouraged to be strong. And I like to tell the men, in particular, to be encouraged to show their heart. So we have a slow, beautiful song for you. One hand, one heart.
Go be adventurous and do your thing, and we've got your back. Thank you again for having us. We have one more quick song, and if you know it, we want you to join in. And this is a South African protest song, and it's really a testament to how change can happen just by singing peacefully, right? Protesting peacefully. And so we give you now, Siyahamba is the African name, but in English it's We Are Marching in the Light of God. 1, 2, 3.
Marching in the light of God. We are 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 marching, marching, we are marching, marching, we are marching in the light of God. We are marching, marching, we are marching, marching, we are marching in the light of God. We are singing 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 in the light of God. We are singing, singing, we are singing, singing, we are singing in the light of God. We are singing, singing, we are singing, singing, we are singing in the light of God. We are dancing 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 in the light of God. We are dancing, dancing, we are dancing, dancing, we are dancing in the light of God. We are dancing, dancing, we are dancing, dancing, we are dancing in the light of God.
Sadly, now you're stuck with me. Now we're going to continue with our program this evening, or this afternoon, I should say. But before we get going, I would like to introduce some special guests that are with us this afternoon. And I understand Alicia Nichols with Supervisor Pifo's office is here. Alicia, can you just stand up real quick? Representing our new state senator who represents St. Mary's so well up in Sacramento, Teresa Geringer. Teresa? And I'd like to point out that she's a member of the Lafayette School Board, an elected official in her own right. So welcome as well. Representing Congress member Barbara Lee, we have Adrienne Ursino. Adrienne is an alumni of the George Miller Farm team of people that have gone off to be chiefs of staff in several other congressional offices. We're also pleased to have Mary Nicely here representing Assemblyman Tony Thurman. And it gives me great pride to welcome former Assembly member Nancy Skinner here. And like Mark Dusonier, when he was in Sacramento, every year the governor, both parties, would cut the Cal Grant. And the Cal Grant is very important to our students. And Nancy represented St. Mary's and the La Miranda area in her assembly district. And when she was chair of the Assembly Budget Committee, she fought back. Mark fought back. And they preserved the Cal Grant that so many of our students have really benefited from. So I want to give Nancy another round of applause, please. And we have some past recipients of the Henning Award. We're really honored to have these individuals come here and join us this afternoon. And I know John Moylan. Mr. Moylan, are you here? Dennis Kelly. Dennis, would you please stand? And one of the honoriest ones, our good friend, Maria Elena Durazo. Maria, yeah, that's right. I'd also like to acknowledge Ulisa Elenis, and she's the leader of Unite Here Local 2850. They represent the servers that served you this afternoon. Elena. And I know they don't want me to do this, but I'm going to ask Chanel Scales and Adrian Orsino just to join me as I read this letter. Would you please come on up? Chanel also was part of the George Miller Farm team, and she is Mark's chief of staff. I asked them if they would read this, and they said, no, they're not. They don't want to do it. They're off duty. They don't have to. So, well, you're not off duty. But I asked them to come up here because we have a special letter here that I'm going to read, but I'm really glad that they're here. Dear friends, with enormous pride, I send my greetings and congratulations to the John F. Henning Institute and St. Mary's College on your inaugural Labor Award lunch, honoring a great American and our dear friend, Congressman George Miller. For 4 decades, George Miller served his nation with distinction. In Congress, he was a fierce labor champion, working tirelessly on behalf of working families. As chair of the House Education and Labor Committee, he was responsible for reinstating wage protections for Gulf Coast workers in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, sponsoring the Fair Minimum Wage Act of 2007, and authorizing the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, which helps women fight against pay discrimination. His steadfast commitment to raising the minimum wage, increasing worker safety, and strengthening the middle class made us all proud. Dean of California's congressional delegation, George always drew special inspiration from his constituents and from his home state. Honoring Congressman George Miller is a fitting tribute to another great American, the legendary labor leader, Jack Henning. Jack Henning was our hero. For four decades, he fought for the front lines of the labor movement, for justice, equality, and human rights for millions of Americans. Thank you for this opportunity to join in honoring my colleague in Congress and dear friend George Miller and remembering the great Jack Henning. Best regards, Nancy Pelosi. And that's why I wanted Adrian and Chanel be up here, because they also represent members of Congress. Thank you. And with that, I would also like to stray from the program just a minute to invite another friend of ours to come on up and say a few words, our good friend, Congressman Mark DeSaulnier.
Got a relative back there applauding a little longer, or a former employee maybe. I just want to really thank St. Mary's. Yesterday at this time, your president and I are proud graduates of, I always have to admit this, a Jesuit college. Jimmy and I graduated from the College of the Holy Cross. Yesterday I had breakfast with Father Barrows, and we talked about St. Mary's and Jim. But we also talked about how important it is for Catholic education, but the incredible inspiration experience of having the Pope come and talk about the social gospel of Christ, which most of us in this room and availed us of these educations realized that when we went out in the world, just as these young people, that we were supposed to help one another, and that we were supposed to fight for one another, and that wealth was something that wasn't just the acquisition of goods, but wealth was the friendships and the connection to other human beings, to make sure in this country it's all about equal opportunity. And we're at a point right now, and it's mostly I want to thank you for this, because I get to work in a place following Congressman Miller, and Congressman Miller told me this before I went back, that I should be prepared for the obvious, that members from other parts of the country didn't think like members from the Bay Area. I keep telling them, why do you want to take away NLRB? Why do you want to hurt people? We have really stringent worker protections in the Bay Area, and our economy does much better than Alabama, Mississippi, but that's fun to say in meetings, but it doesn't seem to convince them. So I just mostly want to thank you, and also to recognize George Miller. When the first day I went into the Education and Workforce Committee to take George's seat as a representative from Northern California on that committee, where he had been the chair and the ranking member for so long. The new ranking member, Bobby Scott from Virginia, a wonderful member, was waiting for me with this big grin on his face, and he says, "Come here." So he drags me over to where I'm going to sit, and he sits me down there, and he says, look who's looking over your shoulder." And it's a giant color portrait of the former chair, Mr. Miller. And we have pictures on our social media where I'm looking confused during hearings, and he's looking down at me like, "I'm going to have to kick your ass if you don't start moving and protecting people here." So that's all to say thank you. I think this is such an important time in our country. You know, we hear that from politicians always. Yesterday, hearing the new speaker actually get up and speak with a good deal of emotion, I thought, about income inequality and the struggle for working Americans to have not just enough wages, but also, because of the cost of living, enough purchasing power. So we're in a moment where both parties are saying the same things, but both parties have to have a renewed passion, and particularly the minority party has to have a renewed passion to make sure that every American has opportunity, doesn't graduate from college with ridiculous debt. Every minute in the United States, we add another $3 million of student debt. That 3 million Americans own as much as 150 million Americans is not to ascribe blame to anybody, except to all of us who believe in the American dream and the American faith and opportunity for everybody, that the labor movement has been the most forceful, passionate instrument of in this country. And right when that labor movement is struggling for new members and is being attacked all the time, there's no more appropriate person to thank for his service and his incredible passion for working people. And if any of you have ever had a chance to see the video that Barb Johnson and Congressman Miller's staff did of the greatest moments of George Miller on the floor of the House of Representatives, you will be glad to know that he cost you your tax dollars by breaking, I think, 3 or 4 podiums. Rick Nolan from Minnesota got up and spoke recently, a wonderful member, and he got up and he was pounding away, and I was sitting right next to Peter Welsh, and Peter Welsh from Vermont forgot that I was there, and he goes, "We've found our new George Miller." I'm like, "Hey, man." I will admit it, I'm no George Miller, but thank God we had him. Thank God for all of you for what you do. Thank God for the Henning Institute, and thank God for working labor in America.
And thank you, Mark. And thank you for your remarks. And also, Mark also fought back on the Cal Grant, and he initiated something that's become a tradition here at St. Mary's, and that's the legislative lunch. And so I know that Tony Thurman's got a representative here, and Steve Glazier. So in May, you'll be getting an email from me inviting your members here to continue with the Mark DeSaulnier annual legislative lunch here at St. Mary's College. Yeah. And it's with great pleasure that I also bring legendary Brother Mel back up and Mr. John Henning Jr. for the real program this afternoon. And one last thing, you have to stay till the bitter end. I have a special presentation for all of you, so you don't want to miss that, so make sure you stay till the end.
This is a lot, I think.
Yes, I better let you get close.
All right, thanks, John. John F. Henning Institute for Dignity of Work and the Worker. Honorable George Miller, Member of Congress from 1975 to 2015. To the title Legislator, Honorable from Antiquity, you, a tireless advocate of measures to foster economic growth and the fair wages for all, to ensure workers' access to health care and secure retirement, to bring uplifting educational opportunities within the reach of all, to conserve and defend our common heritage, the earth, have added new luster in our time. Therefore, the John F. Henning Institute and St. Mary's College of California confident of the approbation of myriads of your fellow citizens, offer this heartfelt declaration of thanks, congratulations, and commendation. Given at St. Mary's College, October 30th, 2015. Yeah, give it to George. What's that?
There's more. Before we get, yeah. And at this time, I'd like to invite President Donahue back up and Courtney Lohman. What year are you, Courtney? Class of '05, and she is with Alumni Relations, and her and Jim have a special presentation this afternoon as well. And then, George, when you're done, then we can have your comments.
Have the honor of welcoming George Miller not just to our campus today, but into the ranks of our alumni. We, George, have designated you an honorary alumnus of St. Mary's College, and we are so proud to include you in our community. You always have been a part of our community, but in a very special way as an honorary alumnus. Now you can put on your veto if you still have a veto. Honorary class of 2015. So George, please, on our behalf. Now.
I never know when a production of a Tim Farley show begins, or whether we're in the middle of it, so it's always very difficult. Whew. Well, thank you so very, very much. This is a wonderful honor for me today to be here, certainly to be at St. Mary's College, which has been a part of certainly my private life with my grandfather and my father. Both have graduated from St. Mary's, and my public life, because I've used this college as a resource for so many different purposes throughout my career in the Congress. And now to think that I'm an alumni. It's funny, I was only here for one water polo season. I don't know if that. I must have accumulated one hell of a lot of units at that particular time to become an alumni, but I'm honored by the idea that I would be included in the alumni of this incredible college. And Mark, thank you so much for making the effort to be here. I know where you were yesterday, and making that. Well, be careful what you wish for, Mark. I didn't say this was going to be all daisies and roses, you know. There is the tea party. I'm sorry about that. But no, we got to stop this. And thank you so much, John, Dan, and the Henning family for being here and for supporting the Institute. It's a terribly important institute, and some people would argue that labor's time has come and gone, and I think the fact of the matter is it may be more important to say that there's no more important time for working people in this country to have the participation and support and hopefully their membership in organized labor. So thank you to all of my friends in labor. We had a great ride for those 40 years. I could have never done it without the home support. I always knew, however far I was walking out on that limb, that they had my back, and I can't tell you what it meant all of those years to know that support was there. So thank you so much to you all here. John Henning was a remarkable person, and everybody in this room understands that. But for someone like myself, when I first, I knew of John Henning because of my father's relationship with him when my father was in the state legislature. And, but then when my father passed away and I ran for his seat in the state Senate, where I would since learned from a person who introduced me one night that I'm the only person in America that had a mandate to go to law school instead of go to the state legislature. They voted for John Nedgerly. What the hell do I know? Anyway, but Jack Henning helped me in that campaign, and then again when I ran for Congress. But in between that time, he was among a number of people that ended up being my mentors. They didn't know it at the time, and I didn't know it at the time until I needed to use the lessons that I took away from their friendship, from their conversations, from their debates that I was able to participate in. When I lost the election, I went back to law school at UC Davis, and I worked full-time for George Moscone. And there I met John Henning as a representative of labor working the legislature in our state. And I had the opportunity to join in many discussions where his participation was about legislation, because George Moscone carried a lot of labor legislation. But I also had a time from time to time to meet him in the Senator Hotel Lounge, where he would tell me about the history of labor and about the battles that he'd been through and about the role of labor and the importance of it. It was like a one-on-one seminar that was just magnificent. And I so admired him, and you know, people have always talked about his voice when he's giving speeches. Sometimes when he wants to make a point and he's sitting about 5 feet or 4 feet from you, it's the same voice. So it kind of blows your hair back a little bit for emphasis. But it was a remarkable group of people that I came of age in politics, from my father, from George Moscone and Jack Henning, Joe Alioto, Phil Burton, John Burton, a great group of people who really lived and personified in public policy the idea of Catholic social thought and Catholic social justice. And it has stuck with me, and it gave me the fortitude to do some things from time to time that were very, very unpopular at that time, but maybe later became the majority, and the laws changed in this country and attitudes changed. It wasn't just strictly Catholic. It wasn't strictly Christian. It had Bert Coffey, who was my mentor and so many people in that room's mentor as they entered politics at different times in a different generation. And it continues through to my retirement and even today in our continued conversations with Nancy Pelosi. When she lays down the law from time to time in a bipartisan meeting among the leadership, it was wonderful to sit in her office, and Speaker Boehner or one of his lieutenants would say, "How do you get off saying this? Where do you think that how do you believe this? How do you know that this is going to be the right thing?" And she says, "It's all in the prayer of St. Francis." And the room would just go silence. It'd just be silence. And she would, she wouldn't break a smile. That was the answer. And you could see the digestive process trying to think this out. Now, what's my response back to that answer? And so it was a wonderful way to practice politics. And I'm so fortunate to have had that experience with those individuals who were so strongly believing that the mission of those of us who are fortunate enough to hold public office is about social justice. And today we see a nation that's absolutely embroiled in this discussion of social justice, of economic inequality, however the terms you want to use. And in fact, you can use them all, because the conversation is across all of these areas. And it's critical that as we think about this, we think about those institutions. I was just at a conference in Los Angeles with 3,000 people from all over the country representing various institutions and organizations on the issue of income inequality. And as I was listening to the presentations and later made a presentation, I was thinking, and it was brought up by a number of the speakers also, it wasn't my original thinking, but the dependence, if you're going to get this right, the need for organized labor. If you look around the country, and we're discussing this, if you think about where there's labor density, there's much greater social mobility. Your chances of being socially mobile across income, across the social status in where there's heavy labor density is far greater than anywhere else in the country. And where you have the least labor density, you have the least social mobility of people bettering themselves than their parents or their grandparents, however we measure that in this country. And of course, education. Where education works, where kids can get a first-rate education, it makes a big difference, and that certainly takes you to the Teachers for Tomorrow program here at St. Mary's, which is just I bragged on them for what's it been now 15 years or 12 years, whatever. On the quality of teachers that they present to our school systems across this state and across the country. It's been my passion my whole life is about the education of young children and the chances to sort of cash that ticket of your American citizenship with economic opportunity. And that's St. Mary's, and that's why this award means so much to me. There's a lot of lessons learned in all those conversations, and you'll notice there's a significant number of St. Mary's graduates, a couple of USF guys, but what the hell. They fell by the way, you know. But some great lessons. One of the quick lessons was Joe Alioto, who was, when he was like a bull, he was a charger. Second only to Gene McAteer, it was sort of the same school. Those of you who grew up in the city would recognize. And he was running for governor, and he'd helped me in my Senate campaign. He was going to run for governor. And he came to Martinez, he came to the Carpenter's Hall, Tim, and it was sort of the Sons of Italy because they were so proud that an Italian American was going to run for governor, and then the Democratic Club. And when he came in, he sort of came in and nobody stood up, nobody applauded, and he walked around to a few of the tables, and either they were in awe or they just didn't quite get it, because I'm not sure he was the featured person, but he knew the event was taking place. In politics, three people on a street corner, you shake their hands and become a member of the family. And so he was in the room. And so they finally got him up to speak, and he tore the place down. I mean, it was rocking when he was done. So I went up to him and I said, Mr. Mayor, I said, I feel bad about when you came in that people didn't seem to go to you and recognize you, what have you. He says, George, he says, in politics, no one remembers how you entered the room. They remember how you left the room. And it's with me my whole life, my whole political life. And when I was thinking of retiring, I was thinking about how do you remember a person who's been in public life all these years? And it is probably how you leave the room. And thinking of Joe Alioto, I said to myself, you know what, I think it's time to go home. And I'm so happy I did, and I'm so happy I'm here today, and thank you so much for the recognition. I really deeply appreciate it. And thank you to so many people in this room who helped me get elected every 2 years, and to the wonderful staff that made it all possible. We had a great team all of these years with talented and deeply, deeply committed people to social justice and righting the wrongs, and I was so proud to be part of that. Thank you so much for this award. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And I like to also admit that George is one of our Martinez residents. But he touched on something that in the spring of 1974, George was running for Congress. I was 14 years old. I was working on his campaign. And I, too, was at the Martinez Carpenters Hall, and I met Joe Alioto, and to this day, I still remember him. He was just a really imposing character, and you don't forget characters like that. Well, I want to thank you all for being here today. I just have a few final closing comments. I would like to acknowledge some of our sponsors that really helped us out today, and that's Archer Norris, Moylan Brewing Company, our friends from Unite here, Painters Unions, District 16, the Contra Costa Central Labor Council, Plumbers and Steam Fitters Local 159 from Martinez, Sheet Metal Workers 104, and I also want to acknowledge Professor Ted Tsukahara, who's been head of the Henning Institute. Without Ted's continued dedication and focus, this event would not happen. So I want to, thank you all again for recognizing Ted. And lastly, we want to thank the Moylan family, who, as you leave, they present a special little St. Mary's ale for your pleasure. So on your way out, please grab a glass and tip a pint. So thank you all for coming.